Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to discuss the very real prospect now that Boris Johnson could survive all the way to the next election. A Conservative MP stated quite clearly that he has no problems backing a lawbreaker as head of government. Explicitly said so. Now this is quite a new phase, and one which shows that Tory MPs may be realising that they're now in too deep. They're just in too deep to back out now. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. There is actually potentially another little wrinkle to what I'm going to talk about in this one. We're going to do it as a separate video because you have to go in quite deep into it. This video is based on the assumption that when it comes out, there hasn't reached the number of letters required to trigger a leadership challenge to Boris Johnson. If that threshold is reached, you may imagine, oh, this could be bad for Boris Johnson. But actually, in the current political climate, it might actually be Boris Johnson's supporters who put their letters in wanting that challenge. But I'll talk about that in another video. This one is about a genuinely surprising new turn of events for me. You know, one of the big political questions from the past 2 years in the UK has been, for those of us with our eyes open anyway, what will it be that causes Boris Johnson to fall? Because Tory MPs, when they were making him their leader, they knew he was unfit to govern. They knew that. They were choosing the only person they thought had the campaigning skills to win an election, and they were probably right. But he's unfit for government. He was always unfit for government. So what is it that's going to bring him down? For the last half year, we may have imagined it would be the fact that he's going to cost the Conservatives the next election. He's broken the trust of the voters who elected him. It started with the Owen Paterson scandal, gathered pace with Partygate. Now, Partygate isn't going to go away, that's clear, but here's the thing. Even if it did, it wouldn't help Johnson or his supporters, because Partygate wasn't a one-off scandal. It was just the one that hurt the public the most. But with Boris Johnson, you will always get the scandals. He has a phenomenal disregard for norms of behaviour. He thinks himself special, above the rules. He is an Etonian who was considered an entitled prick even by the standards of the ultra-privileged Eton. There will always be more scandals. There'll be scandals taking place right now that we just don't know about. And the scandals to come maybe the sort he would have got away with in the past. You know, like the issue of Tory donors paying for his meals or the refurbishment of his flat. Serious issues of conflicts of interest there. But the public didn't care. But they will care about the next scandal, even if it's no worse than those other ones. And why? Because they'll no longer excuse his behaviour on the basis he's trying his best. Because before, it's not that they were in favour of Boris Johnson's scandals. It's just that they thought, well, you know, he's doing his best, isn't he? They now know he isn't. They know he doesn't care about them. They know he is just a selfish, vain liar. And I've said before, Tory MPs have made a mistake in not getting rid of him earlier. Last December was the best time. They had evidence that it was an electoral liability. And Labour had not yet cemented their poll lead. It was rescuable for them. That was the time to replace the leader, get an instant bounce back in the polls and press ahead. Partygate would have blown away because the person responsible would have gone. It would have been a non-story all of a sudden. You know, they still could have got rid of him when the police fined Johnson. But then they had another excuse because at that point it's like not just the behaviour, he's now a criminal. Can't have a criminal prime minister. But that moment has passed now as well. Imagine some hypothetical future. Might be next month, might be next week, might be next year. But imagine there's a point in the future where a majority of Tory MPs are satisfied that Johnson is not helping their interests and they have a viable alternative, because that's the other side of the equation there. What excuse would they give at that time for forcing Johnson to resign then? What could they say about his unsuitability that is not known now? There isn't anything, is there? Basically, Tory MPs are in too deep. They missed the boat. But it still genuinely shocked me to hear a Conservative MP say this.
And you're content to back a lawbreaker in office?
I certainly am, and I think the Prime Minister's got many achievements. So
a Conservative MP explicitly stating that he is willing to back a lawbreaker in the highest office in the land. Really clearly. Now, obviously, they'd been implicitly making this clear for some time. Boris Johnson is officially a criminal. He has been for a couple of months now. No argument about that. Johnson made no attempt to appeal his fixed penalty notice, as he had the right to if he thought himself innocent. Johnson broke the law. He broke criminal law. He's a criminal. And we're not talking about one event where he could argue it was inadvertent. You know, if it was just that birthday party, the only party he was actually fined for, then they could have recovered. It's still a bad look to have a criminal carry on in office, but politically they would survive that. But there was a whole catalogue of parties. That he wasn't fined for them in some ways makes it worse amongst the public. There was a minimum of one party every week, we now know. Wine Time Friday, plus others mixed in. I talked about the Grey Report earlier, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but wine up the walls, people vomiting, having fights. That's not the beating heart of government. That's the last days of Sodom and Gomorrah. That MPs have not removed him by now means that every single one who has not submitted a letter is, of course, backing a lawbreaker in office. But you would at least expect them to muddy the waters. Try and make out it's not really lawbreaking. Oh, you call him a criminal. He's not really a criminal, is he? Not a real crime. You know, like a white collar crime, like speeding or something. Try and belittle the nature of the offence as not real. You know, like middle class people sometimes do, who, by the way, are their target voters anyway. You know, pulled over by the police. Aren't you got real criminals to catch? Yeah, you're breaking the law, so you are a real criminal, mate. But no, he just came out and said it. He backs a lawbreaker in office. Do you back a lawbreaker in office? Yes, I do. Out there. Maybe other MPs will say the same thing in future. And why isn't he trying to muddy the waters? Why is he just coming out and explicitly saying, yep, he's a lawbreaker, absolutely, and I don't care? Because he's in too deep. Voters know that Johnson's a liar. They know he's a lawbreaker. There's no point in any Tory trying to counter that view. It's established. So there are only two things to do. The first is to get rid of him. Well, they aren't doing. Maybe a majority still intend to, because the Privileges Committee could recommend a suspension for Johnson that would lead to him being recalled from Parliament. And that's, you know, one of the complicating facts I'm going to talk about in another video this weekend. But there are clearly MPs who seem to be committing their futures to a Johnson-led party now. They've come to the conclusion that for whatever reason, they aren't prepared to take him out. If the Privileges Committee take him out, fine, but they are not prepared to take him out. It might be because they fear being deselected for being a political assassin, or that they fear that there isn't anyone who will help save their seat for them in the next election. Remember, different MPs have different political calculations. Some MPs are going to lose their seats at the next election if they do not turn poll ratings around. These ones need to back the best possible leader. The grim reality is, as insane as it sounds, some of them think Johnson is that leader. But some are in safe seats and are more concerned about the party overall. I know it looks like there's no safe seat right now, but that's by-elections. In a by-election, opposition parties, whichever one's in the best place, can throw the kitchen sink at it. Come the general election, neither Labour nor the Lib Dems can afford to target every Conservative seat like they could in a by-election. So most Tory seats will actually not be challenged strongly at the next election. So the calculations are really quite different. But what unites them all is the feeling that clearly it's not the right time to get rid of Johnson. Maybe some of them think it never will be. So then use your second option. If you're not prepared to get rid of him, you have to utterly commit. Utterly. It's like when I used to do judo. So as a beginner, you learn how to do your throws, and then you instinctively try and throw your opponent while remain on your feet, while remain balanced yourself, because you feel vulnerable if you go to the ground. But it doesn't work. You have to completely commit yourself. The trick in judo is to throw yourself to the ground and make sure your opponent ends up underneath. Same thing here. Once you've made the decision to not oppose Johnson, you have to completely commit. No point in a halfway house between disapproving of the Prime Minister's behaviour whilst doing nothing about it. Because if you have in your mind that Johnson will lead the next election campaign, you have to make out that he's the best thing since sliced bread. Any perceived flaws have to be dismissed as irrelevant next to the brilliance of his achievements. A non-issue stacked against the important work that he's doing. Not quite sure what that work is exactly. They say he got Brexit done. but he's expending a fair amount of energy into undoing it. Tricky to talk about levelling up if you're a Northern Red Wall Tory MP. The least said about the cost of living crisis, the better. Perhaps the vital work he's been lauded for is making sure he keeps the cheese and wine shops of London going through tough economic times. But right now, it's possible that there are two types of MP committing to Johnson in this way. Those who actually intend to back him. These ones are making a mistake. At the next election, Johnson will not be believed. The Tories do not make promises they intend to keep. Their entire strategy is based around two things: promising to do better than Labour at lower cost. This is going to be a lot tougher because they failed to deliver their levelling up programme and have imposed the highest taxes in generations. But most of all, Johnson isn't trusted. People won't believe his promises. Second, they like to blame any economic pain on Labour. This will be much more difficult to do when Labour haven't been in power for over 14 years. Then there's the second type of MP backing Johnson. They'll be ones who want the privileges committee to get rid of him. These ones aren't as foolish. This strategy does allow them to keep their hands clean, but it has the problem of damage to the party. If Johnson is removed by a parliamentary committee instead of the wider parliamentary party, people will ask why Tory MPs didn't have the guts to do the job themselves. But there is also another complicating factor, which, as I say, will be in another video. So we seem to have an issue here where the Conservatives are shackled by a combination of cowardice and stupidity. Maybe worth it if we do get rid of them at the next election and cultivate the conditions needed for major electoral reform, powered by a desire to never allow such a government of narrow interest to form power again. But for now, I just look at it and I just think to myself, why are you doing this? And then you just think, they're just in too deep, aren't they? They're flapping about like wet hens. They must now be made to suffer for it for the next 2.5 years. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. Maybe click on the join button if you'd be interested in memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.